Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our MC, Attorney Roderick R.C. Salazar III.
Thank you, Joanne, for that very kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Morning. Welcome to the 78th Philippine Mining Club Luncheon. Imagine, we've been here for quite some time, and it's been many sessions of interesting topics on mining. And let me first acknowledge the very important guests that we have at this session. We have Ms. Tarja Kukkanen from the Embassy of Finland. Welcome. We have Mr. Lachlan Parsons, the Second Secretary for Economic Affairs of the Australian Embassy. Who else do we have? We have the others that have been acknowledged as well. And of course, thank you again and welcome to our esteemed guests from government, from the mining industry, from the professional and non-government organizations. We also have guests from the academe and of course the Philippine Mining Club members. So we will be issuing certificates of attendance for those who want to get such, and you can request a copy from Joanne earlier. And then of course we will open the floor to questions and answer at after the speeches of our esteemed guest speakers. But at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we will start with our first speaker, and let me introduce our speaker to you today, and it is my privilege. Luisa Rust is the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner at the Australian Embassy in Manila. Luisa leads a dynamic and energetic team responsible for growing Australia and Philippines trade, investment, and education relationship. Luisa is committed to identifying commercial opportunities, creating connections, and realizing the full potential of the bilateral relationship between the two countries, Philippines and Australia. Luisa has over 20 years of international business experience in public and private sector roles, including Australian Consul for Commercial and Trade Commissioner in Austrade, Shanghai from 2010 to 2014, and short-term assignments in Singapore and Japan. And Luisa's experience in strategic engagement, international advisory services, and program delivery across a diverse range of sectors has enabled her to support leading Australian exporters and investors to achieve their international business aspirations. Luisa's recent role was leading Austrade's delivery of the Australian Southeast Asia Business Exchange Program, the Australian government's flagship program supporting the Australia Southeast Asia Economic Strategy. She holds a Master of Business International Marketing from University of Technology, Sydney, and a Bachelor of Economics from the University of Sydney. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a round of applause to Luisa Rust to speak on Australia's Southeast Asian economic strategy.
Oh, thank you very much, Attorney. That was a wonderful introduction. I sound a lot more important than I think I really am. But thank you very much for having me today. Good morning to esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. Madangang tanghali, mabuhay. So forgive me if that doesn't sound great, but thank you. Thank you very much to the Philippine Mining Club for the opportunity to speak today and also meet the Filipino mining community. But also, it's so lovely to be here and see so many Australian people in the audience, Australians and also Australian mining companies that are here. I've been on board since July, so that's why I was a bit chuffed with myself with my mabuhay. So I'm only new to the market here, but so far I've been so impressed with the warmth of the Filipino business community, the hospitality, the culture, the food, and more importantly, the trade and investment opportunities for Australia and the Philippines, and also the collaboration that I already see that's in market and developing here. It's a really exciting time for all of us. The mining industry in the Philippines presents great opportunities for the Filipino people, for the business community, and also for the Australian mining industry. Yes, we face some challenges, but both our countries' people are practical problem solvers, and particularly the Filipinos have amazing resilience. And I saw that in my first month here with the floods and everything that happened. And together, I'm sure we can work together to develop this fantastic opportunity. But before I begin, I'd like to share a 1-minute video with you on the Australian mining industry that showcases our capabilities. Thank you. There, it's a great video that demonstrates the mining industry and how all our lives are supported by the sector. The Australian mining contributes close to 14% of Australia's GDP and makes up more than 2/3 of Australia's merchandise exports. The country holds 30% of the world's estimated 170 billion tonnes of iron ore, and it has the 3rd largest coal reserves, next to the US and China, and one of the largest exporters of natural gas and one of the world's top producers of gold. About 60% of Australia's gold resources are in Western Australia. Because of its rich geological endowment, expertise in mining and its track record as a reliable producer, and exporter of energy and resources, Australia can play a pivotal role in delivering the processed minerals the world needs for a clean energy future. Globally, the demand for minerals necessary for the development of clean energy technologies will double or even quadruple by 2040. Sorry, I'm not good at holding the mic and turning a page. Australia, as a major supplier of critical minerals, will help the world to decarbonise the economy, including enabling Australia to reach its own targets by 2030 and net zero by 2050. Reaching net zero by 2050 will require the expertise of the resources sector. The modern mining workforce will require leading-edge technical skills, advanced engineering, robotics and communication, among others. Technological innovation will continue to change the nature of work in mining and skills requirements. The Minerals Council of Australia has invested over $65 million into minerals higher education since 2000. MCA, together with universities across the country, has developed a world-class minerals education sector that is delivering the skills needed for the industry for today and for tomorrow. Austrade Manila had a transnational education mission in July 2024, and it was participated by 15 Australian universities and was led by our new Trade Commissioner in Austrade Manila, Bernice Vanguardia, and Bernice is here with us today. The objective of the mission was to determine how universities like Curtin and Monash, Melbourne University could partner with the Commission on Higher Education and work with Philippine universities to deliver Australian education here in the market. It was really fantastic, and already we've had about 5 MOUs signed, so we're making good progress in regard to that initiative. To conclude, there is a crucial role for the mining sector in both our countries, and its extended value chains can fast-track the exploration of critical minerals to achieve net zero by 2050, and for others aiming to achieve them by 2030. I'd like to highlight that Australia is committed to collaborate with the Philippine mining industry through education and training, and to ensure that we have the right skills to transition to a green economy net zero by 2050. Australia is open to share the skills and expertise in mining to companies, to mining students, engineers, and offer vocational training courses as well. I'd also like to invite you all to come down to Sydney in October. There's the International Mining and Resources Conference, IMARC. It's on from the 29th to the 31st of October. It'll be an opportunity to explore how the industry can accelerate the transition to net zero, to ensure ESG standards and the obligations met, and foster shared values and economic prosperity. So let us work together to harness the potentials of both our countries in mining and in skills training. I've looked forward to meeting you all over the next 3 years in my role as the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner, and really creating collaboration with both our countries in the mining sector. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa, for that very interesting presentation on the Australian mining industry and your willingness to cooperate with the Philippine government and the Philippine mining industry on sharing of education and training skills as well. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we will now have our next speaker, who is Mr. Craig Annison. Craig is a seasoned geophysicist with more than 30 years global experience in ground and airborne geophysical projects for exploration and development in the mineral, energy, geothermal, groundwater, environmental, and government sectors. He has held a wide range of key technical, management, and business development roles with major geophysical groups including Fugro Airborne Surveys, CGG Multiphysics, and since July 2021, Xcalibur Smart Mapping. Craig is based in Perth, Western Australia, and he currently drives business development for Xcalibur Smart Mapping across the Asia-Pacific region, as well as providing strategic and technical direction to Excalibur's global sales initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about airborne geophysical mapping for exploration, development, and management of natural resources, a big hand to Mr. Craig Annison.
Thanks, Atty. And thanks for everyone for being here and the Philippine Mining Club for hearing my talk. When it comes up, I'd just like to introduce the company that I work for, Xcalibur Smart Mapping, and show some of the services that we provide to invigorate mining industries around the world. It didn't take me long to kill that. Sorry about that. There we go. Good. Okay, who we are. So, Xcalibur Smart Mapping, we acquire, process, interpret airborne geophysical data. And we do that for a range of resource industries, the mining, oil and gas, groundwater, you name it. We're providing geological information from the surface to great depth. So anyone who's interested in that can get use of our products. It may be a new name to some people here, Xcalibur Smart Mapping, but we're actually quite an old company. We used to be called World Geoscience back in the days, and I know there's some old-timers who remember World Geoscience surveying in this country. That was in the 1990s. We have gone through, on the bottom there, you can see a bit of a name change. So World Geoscience became Fugro, became CGG, and we're now Xcalibur. So new name, but a very old company. We're active globally. We're based in Madrid, in Spain, but we have 16 countries. So I work in the Perth office, and from there we fly surveys and operate through Southeast Asia and the Middle East. Just to give you an idea of where we're operating right today, the countries in pink there, we have large projects, and these are projects for the government, and they're designed to acquire data to de-risk exploration for various sectors. So in Japan, we're flying work for the geothermal industry to map areas to progress that. In Mongolia, we're flying to search for copper deposits. Lots of surveys in Saudi Arabia. They're putting a lot of effort into developing their mining industry. India, Indonesia, and Australia. Of course, Australia, we're always doing work for the government there. And in addition to that, we're working on some projects in Kazakhstan and Vietnam that we hope to get up next year. So we're quite active in the region. About 50% of our work is government work, which is this, and the other 50% is for private resource companies, like some of you here. So what is natural resource mapping? Well, it's pretty simple. If you want to make a decision to invest in exploration, you need information on what's in the ground. If you've got no information, you're not going to make a decision. Xcalibur, we acquire the data that helps you make that decision. We can see the things under the ground, and it de-risks your decisions. You know, the top picture could be somewhere in the Philippines. It's got clouds, water, trees and hills. But where do you start exploring? If you've got no data, it's pretty difficult. On the bottom's Australia. We've got no trees, clouds, hills, but we do have a lot of soil covering. In that picture there's about 100 metres of soil above the prospective rocks. So it's also difficult for us to explore. And in both cases, the only way to get that information is to drill holes everywhere or to do geophysics, which can see beneath the ground. If you don't have that information, people that explore, they won't explore. They'll take their money and they'll go to another jurisdiction where it's easier. And we've seen that in numerous cases around the world. So it's very important to have this data available for your mining industry. So what do? We do airborne geophysics. So we build our own systems. You can't buy these off the shelf. We acquire magnetic data, radiometric data, gravity data, and gravity maps rocks by their density contrasts, and electromagnetic data. So we're mapping rocks based on conductivity contrasts. So we can acquire all these different parameters that tell us a bit about the Earth. For some of these systems, some of these technologies, we just see the surface, but some of them we see 500 metres deep, and some of them can see for kilometres. So there's a range of depths. We fly with fixed-wing aircraft and we fly with helicopters, depending on the terrain and the technology we're using. So we have a large variety of services. So a little short video of some of our systems, just to get the idea of them. There we go. So this is a magnetic and radiometric survey that we're flying. This is a great system for rugged terrain. We're requiring high-resolution magnetics on the two ends of the booms and radiometrics in the cabin. This second system is we call HeliTem. It's a time-domain electromagnetic system. It's like a big metal detector, basically. It'll sense down, explore to about 500 metres, and we fly this along, as you can see there, and we rapidly can survey areas. This is basically used for base metal type applications or even groundwater applications. This is a survey in Western Australia we're flying. The transmitter loop and the receiver, that flies at about 50 metres above the ground, as long as we can do that safely. And the last system is a fixed-wing system. It's a caravan aircraft. It's fitted out with magnetic sensors. You can see them on the tail and also on the wings. We also have gravity systems inside, measuring gravity. So we're measuring the two parameters at once. And we can see it flying backwards and forwards in a grid pattern, very efficiently acquiring high-quality data for the explorers. So that's just a couple of our systems. Okay, I'd like to show you an example that has some similarities to the Philippines. This is a survey that we flew for the Papua New Guinea government, and the whole aim of this survey was to increase foreign investment into the mining industry. They use this data to update their geological maps, and they also provided the data to the mining companies for use for exploration. So Papua New Guinea, like the Philippines, has got very high potential mineral targets and prospectivity. However, it's a complex and difficult place to work. You can see the tenements that we flew here and here. So this is in the highest of the highlands, where pretty hard to work. Remote locations, severe topography, vegetation, cloud cover. I'm sure there's many places in Philippines similar. And consequently, what happens is there's not a lot of exploration. It's too risky for the companies to go out there, too expensive. So this is a map of the tenements that were actively being explored before we did the survey. So there's a few there in the yellow. But when the government released that data and they made it available at a nominal cost, people started to see that data and start to take up tenements. So 1 year later, these tenements were taken up. The next year, these tenements were taken up. The third year, and then the fourth year. So in 4 years, they'd gone from a very small amount of people exploring to almost all of that. And that's the most difficult sort of terrain to explore in. So this is the value that data brings. So in the mining company's eyes, the risk is reduced and they get excited about targets they could pursue. And from the government's point of view, they're getting a lot of people exploring. So it's a win-win. Okay, so that's sort of government sort of scale work, but we also do 50% for companies, private companies. So I've got a few examples of surveys that we've flown for mineral exploration. And the first one's gold exploration, and this is using magnetics and radiometrics. We call them XMag, that's our brand name. We have systems on helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. They're both very similar. They both have sensors on the end of the booms or on the end of the wingtips. We try to fly very low. The lower you fly, the better your data, but of course you've got to fly safely. So we use these particular aircraft. The yellow aircraft is a crop duster type aircraft called an air tractor. It's the safest aircraft you can get to fly low, so that's why we use it. So anyway, in the data example, this is a data example exploring for gold in the West Australian goldfields in an area that there's a lot of cover. So there's a lot of sand and soil. There's not a lot of outcrop. So the geologists can't see the rocks they're exploring in. But the magnetics can see straight through that. So in the picture here, this is magnetics. We can see a number of features. The first one of these oval-shaped features, and they're very large. Look at the scale there. And they're intrusive granites. So they've been in place millions of years ago. The next thing you can see are these rocks that run around the edges. And these are called greenstones. And they're metamorphosed rocks, and they're highly prospective for gold. So they're mapped out beautifully. And if I put on top of this the current and historic gold mines, you can see they lie really closely clustered along those greenstone rocks. And that's just an example of the data focusing the exploration on a very small part of that map that has the highest prospectivity. Okay, the next one is copper exploration. And this is a system we call Falcon. It's a high-resolution gravity system. And I've got an example with some data that's acquired on the ground. So first of all, the system there, it's on a Cessna 208 aircraft. You can see the magnetic sensor out the back. We also have gravity sensors inside the aircraft, and we record acquire LiDAR data as well. So the target here is an iron oxide copper gold deposit. These are typically have a very dense core, so they have a very good gravity response. You're expecting a big high. On the left, the data image on the left shows ground gravity data. This is ground gravity that's been acquired by a number of different people over a number of different years. The data sets are mismatched to a degree. The data is a little bit messy. You can see a circle there. That's the ore body. The central picture shows this is data that's been acquired with the Falcon system, and we acquired that in 2 weeks. It has a resolution of 200 meters, and because we're flying it in a grid, we're getting dense and consistent spacing, and the data result is a lot clearer. It's coherent. We've got a lot of structural detail, and of course, acquired very quickly and at lower cost. So, a good example of flying some airborne gravity data. Okay, the next one is some critical minerals. Everyone's keen on critical minerals. So, for this one, we used our Helitem system, which we saw earlier. There's a lot of technology that goes into this. We've developed over years of research. And one of the benefits we have is we can extend the depth of penetration of this because of its design. So our client had discovered some massive sulfide. They were very excited because it was very high grade, and that was down here on the bottom at a place called Gonyville. The issue is that they drilled that on private property, but to go any further to the north, you may be able to just see a green line that's in the map, just to the north. That's north of that line is the state forest. So they weren't allowed to go and explore in there until they'd done their full environmental assessment and had approvals, which in Australia may take 2 years or more. So we flew the area, and the colours are the data. So the red areas are the conductive data. So that's showing where there's massive sulfide rocks. And the blue areas are the resistive data. That's where there's country rock. So the results were quite spectacular. It showed the mineralisation continuing to the north by about 11 kilometres. It also showed some additional deposits further to the north. And based on that, the mining company went full steam ahead with their environmental applications. It was over 2 years later they received them and they started drilling. It's a pretty considerable deposit now. It's the largest palladium, nickel, copper development in the world, in the Western world, sorry. And it has considerable content of copper, cobalt, nickel, palladium, platinum and gold. So this is the ideal target for an airborne EM survey. And the last one is looking for rare earths. Quite a good target in recent times. Our client was a junior explorer, and they were looking for clay-hosted rare earths, similar to what they mine in China. So you can see where the target is there. So Perth, it's on the south coast. And there was known granites that had high rare earths in this region. So this is why they were exploring in the region. And the model that they were chasing, exploration model, was you'd have the granite intrusion. As that weathered down into clays, those clays are enriched in rare earths. So quite a simple model. A little bit complicated by 50 metres or so of sand that's on top. So this is transported cover. Soil sampling doesn't work there. You have to drill auger holes to get to the basement. So first thing they looked at was, can we see these targets? Can we see the granites? Can we see the source rocks? And yes, you can. So on the left is a magnetic survey, and there's the distinctive rare earth enriched granites. So straight away they're they're finding their source rocks quite quickly and quite accurately. The next thing is to say, well, is there any clays associated with them? Where are the clays going? So I mentioned before, sand dune cover, you can't just soil sample. So they're drilling holes, auger holes 50 or 100 metres deep and sampling. And they're the yellow dots, and they got some very good results. So that's good. But they're exploring a very big area, 70 kilometres by 70. It would cost a very large cost and time to sample that whole area, not to mention the environmental aspects of it. So they look for alternatives, and the Australian government's a very good supporter of the mining industry. They have a project called AusAEM, and their goal is to fly the entire Australian continent with this system. It's an airborne EM system, and it's designed specifically to map geology through the cover. So they're trying to map the basement rocks that you want to mine through the cover. We've flown most of this survey with our Tempest system here. It's an airborne EM system, you can see. And on the bottom you can see the coverage so far. So the blue areas in that map, they're the resistive rocks. Maybe they're fresh rocks, fresh granites. The red areas are the conductive rocks. They might be clays or shales or salt water even. So there's a range of conductivities. So 3 of these lines, the black lines that you can see on the map, they exist already. So the government had already flown them. You can go online, it's free to access that data. The mining company looked at that data to see if it was mapping through the cover, and it was doing a really good job. So clays and granites are a pretty good target for an electromagnetic system. And what we see, these are sections now, and we can see that the clays are in the warm colours, so they're conductive. The fresh rocks, the granites, and also the sands on the top, they're in the blue colours. So we can see quite a lot of detail on how deep the sand is, where the granites are, and what the clays look like. So buoyed by those results, the company flew the whole area. So we flew the whole area for them at 400 metres line spacing. And they really started to look at the data. So rather than just showing where these were, we can actually pull out 4 different zones within the clay targets. So they can see the top transported cover, that's the sand dunes on top. And over the whole area, they can map out how thick it is. So they can see the red area, the yellow areas in this map down here. That's where your sand's more than 50 metres thick. And some areas, the blue area, the dark blue, there's not much sand at all. So you've got a good measure on how deep you need to drill. The next one down is Paleo Valley, and that's in the orange colours. So that's the more conductive target. That's got the clays in it. And superimposed on that, you can see drill holes, the auger holes with the assays. So you can see where the high percentages of rare earth elements are. And again, you can map how thick that zone is, so you can get a good idea of resources. And then the second last one is the saprolite, which is slightly weathered rock, and then into fresh rock. So you can get a very good picture of how thick your zones are, and you get a good idea of where your rare earths are going to be. So with the rare earth, the airborne magnetics does a great job at finding those source rocks. The airborne EM is highly effective in mapping the clays, the ore zones. And it also mapped where there was no point in exploring, where there was granites, really thick sand cover, places where you want to focus on the good things. So it also mapped out those so you can optimise your exploration. Oops, sorry. So that's really it for the talk. Just a little snapshot. So basically, if you want to make decisions about investing in exploration, you need some data, and that's the data that we provide. And we provide it all around the world. And we hope to develop some work in this country to do the same thing. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about a green future at Nickel Asia, let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Jose Bayani Baylon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Attorney Dickey. Attorney Dickey is one of the more preeminent contemporaries I had in law school who chose not to enter either politics or join the bench, and instead devoted his whole career to the practice of law, which benefited, thankfully, the industry. So I'm grateful that you didn't join the ranks of... Never mind. It's a pleasure to be here, but I have to say that when I was invited to speak, I first felt that I was speaking above my pay grade. And the reason why I sat there is because I've been so used to sitting on the sides when my former bosses would deliver luncheon speeches. Rene Cayetano, Dick Gordon, and of course Don Enrique Sobel. And I wish they were here today to see me. I'm also happy to see Joey Ison, whose brother was actually my batchmate in law school because I was delayed for a year. Joel, just as prominent as Joey. Joel is now the president of the Philippine Bar Association, I think for life. It shows you how prominent the Isons are. Actually, Joel Ison was part of a group of, I think, 4 Cebuanos in our class who were the sharpest legal minds in my class, and that's why I always sat with them, especially during exams. But that's the reason also why I decided it was not for me. I got a text yesterday from Ma'am Flor Gozon Tariela. I'm not sure if she's here. And she said, "Uy, you're speaking pala at the Philippine Mining Luncheon." I said, "Ma'am, I don't want to think about it because I get nervous." So now I'm nervous already. And she said, "Don't worry. You're preaching to the choir." And that's good and bad. And I'll tell you why it's bad later. But let me tell you why it's good. It's good because it makes my job easier to explain to you what Nickel Asia is all about. You may not, well, for some of you who may not know some details, Nickel Asia's roots are in a mistake. Because in the 1960s, there was a forestry area in Palawan, and a gentleman called Leonidas Virata asked a 26-year-old lawyer named Manuel Zamora to send a team of foresters to Palawan to check out the site. Manny Zamora, not knowing much at that time, sent 2 men to go who happened not to be foresters but geologists. And so rather than looking at the trees, they were looking at the soil, and they took home a sample of the soil, and they thought it was the biggest copper deposit at that time, because at the time no one knew what nickel was. And so he tells me, "You know, my fortune was built from a mistake." And I said, "Was hiring me also a mistake?" And he said that was the second biggest mistake. But the single mining firm called Rio Tuba at that time became the largest single known nickel deposit in Southeast Asia. A Japanese company called Pacific Metal came in and they built Rio Tuba. And because of the success of Rio Tuba, which started exporting to high-grade ore to Japan in the 70s, somebody approached Mr. Zamora selling him Hinatuan mining for 400 million pesos. This was in the early 1980s. And so Mr. Zamora approached 2 friends, very good friends, and told them, "Would you like to partner with me in buying Hinatuan mining?" And they said, "How much do you need?" Well, he said, "If you give 400 million, I'll give you 50%. Of course, they knew that the whole mining company cost 400 million. And here he was asking the whole amount from them for 50%. And they said, of course, the usual Filipino beautiful words, which I will not mention here. And he simply told them, "If you don't want it, then don't." They coughed up the 400 million. And therefore, Rio Tuba became Hinatuan, and Hinatuan became Taganito, and Taganito became Cagjanao. And in the year 2008, they decided to put everything together under the banner of the holding company Nickel Asia. We're proud of the fact that these four mining firms, what I call the foundational mining firms of Nickel Asia, have among themselves or between themselves won 17 presidential awards from the from the PIMSEA, which happens every November in Baguio. Beyond those four are three new mines, one in Dinapigue in Isabela, which is closer to the Benham Rise than to Manila. One in Bulanjao in Palawan, which actually is an expansion of the Rio Tuba claim, and one on the island of Manicani in eastern Samar, which was suspended for a long time, starting from the term of Herzon Alvarez. It's an island of 500 families, devastated by Typhoon Yolanda in November 8 of 2013. And perhaps is the highest grade nickel you can find at the moment in the Philippines. I remember my first visit to Manicani was on November 10, 2013, because Mr. Zamora sent me there with a bunch of PGH doctors, and I thought, there's no way this island or the community of Giwan can survive Yolanda, because it looked like it looked like an atomic bomb had been dropped. But look at it today. I guess there's some resilience. By the way, I forgot to mention to our friends from Australia. In 2017, when I was working with 7 bright UP students as they were opposing the confirmation of the late, then Secretary-designate Gina Lopez, I had 7 bright UP students who were leading the charge, and they were the ones actually appearing before the Commission on Appointments. 4 of them are now in Australia. So that's how attractive Australian mining is to the Philippines. And I was looking at your video, I was wondering if the gentlemen in the trucks were also Filipinos, but we didn't see that very much. So we have 3 new mines. And over the years, Nickel Asia has won a number of awards, which to me is proof that responsible mining is real and it exists. We are proudest, I am proudest of the upper right, which is the ASEAN Mineral Award, first given out in 2017 by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations when they decided to look at the 10 ASEAN countries and look for the best mining operation in the whole of ASEAN. Of course, Singapore was out, Brunei was out, made it easier for us. And the winner in 2017 was Rio Tuba Nickel Mining Corporation. 4 years later, another subsidiary of ours, Inatuan, won second runner-up in another category of the ASEAN Mineral, telling you that mining in the Philippines meets not only our standards, but international standards as well. So that is Nickel Asia. It is known to most people, but we have another side. If the clicker works. We are also now a renewable energy company. You see, in 2015, we bought a company called Emerging Power Incorporated, which had an operation in Subic, and have grown that into a 172 megawatt operation as of today. In 2022, we are proud to say that when Shell Overseas Investments did a beauty pageant of potential partners in the Philippines, including the big ones, I won't mention them, Aboitiz, Ayala, etc., I won't mention them. They chose little old Emerging Power as their partner. And we have a commitment to work with them to establish 1 gigawatt of energy by the 2028. And who knows what happens beyond. So Nickel Asia now is standing on 2 legs, one in nickel mining and the other one in renewable energy. And I have a media friend here, James Galvez, who has been bugging me, trying to get information. I said, I can tell you some, but I didn't have to kill you. Our operations, for example, we calculated it for whatever it's worth, can light up San Juan, Navotas, and Pateros, the 3 smallest towns in Metro Manila, every day, easily, without any brownouts. And of course, San Juan is special to the Zamoras. And so that's Nickel Asia, mining and renewables. But there is something we've been prouder still, which we started to do in full during the pandemic. This is our foray into sustainability. You know, many people in the Philippines have this misconception that mining cannot be responsible. But I argue that the Mining Act of 1994 includes a concept of a plan. No. Includes a philosophy of ESG that predates the fact that Kofi Annan thought of ESG in 2004. The Filipinos in this room should be proud of the fact that your Mining Act of 1994, especially when passed, was one of the most stringent in the world. And that it imposes, for example, responsibilities on mining companies which were never imposed before. For example, the final mine rehabilitation plan and the SDMP, the fact that we have to spend for communities taking the place of what government is supposed to be doing. And so, can companies enter into sustainability? Can mining companies be sustainable? Of course they can. And we at Nickel Asia have actually taken a leap of faith into this. And I've actually spoken to Secretary Yulo Loizaga and told her, look at us as the guinea pig for the industry. In 2014, we first issued our sustainability report, the first mining company to do so, using GRI standards long before it was required by the PSE. Of course, in 2015, we bought EPI. In 2017, we worked with SGV on enterprise risk management. In 2021, we joined the UN Global Compact, the first Philippine company with mining assets to do so. And I remember 2021 was when Dennis Zamora, our president and CEO, called the MANCOM together because it was a pandemic and said, let us craft a 5-year plan. And now that 5-year plan came two visions. One, that we will end up in the top 25 companies of the PSE or in the PSE index. And two, that we will become a select ESG investment in the Philippines. At that time, I remember he called me to his room and he said to me, JB, you're going to do ESG. And I said, what the hell is ESG? So he sat me down, explained it to me and told me, you will take the lead. And so it was like the blind leading the blind. And we stumbled into ESG. But in 2022, we're proud to say that we made leaps and bounds into the ESG field, so much so that we dared ask a global ratings agency called Sustainalytics to rate us. And I remember telling our MANCOM this: the ratings we will get is like the ratings you will get from your very first executive checkup. There will be good numbers, there will be bad numbers. The important thing is we will know which we have to act on, where we are ahead, and how do we fill up the gaps. And I'll tell you, our initial rating from Sustainalytics was, I think, 43, what they call severe risk, which is where most mining firms are anyway. So we continued. We looked at low-hanging fruit, adopted an anti-bribery policy, adopted a DEI policy, commissioned UP Los Baños to study the impact of our land use on GHG, the first mining firm to do so. And for this year, we're asking CPD and S&P to again give us an audit. I'm happy to say that for me, this has been an easy journey because it is led by no other than the CEO. Many companies in the mining field have tried to launch sustainability programs, but unless it has the support of the board and the CEO, it's going to be difficult. In my case, it was the president and CEO himself, representing the biggest stockholder of the company, which was telling us to drive it. How lucky can we get? We have other commitments as well. The Chamber of Mines is proud of the TSM program, which is a Canadian mining program which they started in 2004 and which the Chamber of Mines has adopted as mandatory for all chamber members in 2017. NAC was able to do an internal audit app just for our purposes, which the chamber has now adopted as part of TSM for the whole country. Again, as I said, we joined the UNGC in 2022, the first Philippine operation with mining assets to do so. And to the surprise of many, we have submitted our zero GHG targets to Science Based Targets International. something again which no other mining firm, as I know, in the Philippines has ever done. We've asked them to evaluate our targets and tell us whether they believe this is doable or not. With all these efforts, we were able to improve our ESG audit from Sustainalytics, improving from a severe 43.7 to a high risk of 34.8. Medium risk of 30 and above is where the best mining companies in the world are, many of them Australian. And Dennis has made that my target to get the bonus this year. I think I'll wait for my bonus next year. I'd also like you to know that because we spoke to UP Los Baños and asked them, help us understand what happens when we clear a hectare of land. Help us understand what GHG emissions we create. When we clear a hectare of land, we now can estimate how much we would like to reduce in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 2025. Again, I don't think there's any other mining firm in the Philippines which has done that. Now, again, since Flor Tariela told me I was preaching to the choir, I had to introduce to you Nicolasia to earn my salary for today. But I'd like to go to an area where I think I'd like to be more controversial. Even if, since I know I won't get a bonus anyway this year. And this is all about changing the narrative. When Ma'am Tariela told me I was speaking to the choir, it reminded me of Tim Walz saying, well, I am speaking to the choir has to sing. In my case, I'm going to tell you that the choir has to sing differently. And I'm telling you, especially the Filipinos in this room, that we have to sing differently. Especially my friends in the Chamber of Mines who sometimes don't invite me to meetings because they think I'm too much of a rabble-rouser. I think we're too reactive. I think we're too defensive, ceding high ground to our critics. And that's the reason why the mining industry, if you take a survey, and if we actually done that, asked a reputable agency to take a survey, a big percentage of Filipinos think mining is bad for the country. In fact, when it comes to professions, I smiled because the lawyers are no longer the most distrusted professionals in the country. It's the miners. I mean, it's that bad. If you can displace the lawyers, sorry, Dicky, it's that bad. Of course, when I joined the mining firm, fresh from a beverage company whose name I will not mention, I was scratching my head and saying, why are we not telling the public the good things we do? Like the first thing they did to me was to send me to Ryutuba, and I walked through a forest and I asked the forester, when are you going to mine this place? And he said, no, sir, we've mined this place. This has been planted up. And he said, how come you don't tell us in Manila? In contrast, the beverage firm where I worked for, I won't tell you the name, whenever we would build a school in the rural areas, we would come out with a full-page ad, Coca-Cola built a school. Of course, there's one very basic difference. Coca-Cola wants you to reach for a Coke in the grocery store because you will see the school behind it. Mining companies don't sell you anything. So they don't need to spend $500 million pesos that Coca-Cola spends on marketing every year. But there is a consequence to that. And the consequence of that is, if you scratch the surface of most Filipinos mining, or even Doc Willie Ong in Singapore said, we have to stop mining. Because we do not tell the country the good things that we do, and every time there's a slip up, media people whose names I will not mention, like Ted Filon, will go to town telling the country the bad things we do. That should stop. There are normally two areas of attack. And the two areas of attack are this. One, that when an accident occurs or when one miner is found to be irresponsible, everyone is. Everyone. And Problem is, so many people swallow it. I call it MAGA-like stupidity. And the saddest part for me is, because I have a brother who is a Jesuit priest, the Catholic Church in the Philippines is one of those who peddles that argument, that they're totally anti-mining, no exceptions. So one time I asked a bishop, well, I said, if you are going to criticize all of us as irresponsible, because one is, then when I find one priest, all of you are. It's as simple as that. Either you lose the logic on all of us, or you don't use the logic at all. This happened just a few months ago. And it is in a diocese with the staunchest anti-mining bishop in the Philippines. I've noticed though that the Bishop of Borongan has changed his tune from no to mining to no to irresponsible mining. So now I am no to pedophile priests. What is also interesting to me, and I think again, us in the mining industry, maybe corporate at the corporate level, should take the offensive, because when the Pope was just an Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he had an interview with Italian journalists. And one of the questions they asked him was this: do you think that Argentina, being so rich in resources, is poor because it's so rich in resources? And you know what the Pope said? I made it a shirt. He said the day will come when we are going to be asked, what have we done to the resources of the country, including mining? So even the Pope, when he was still Bishop of Buenos Aires, was conscious of the fact that the God-given riches of the earth have to be maximized for the use of the people. I made this into shirts and distributed in all of Eastern Samar. And that is also the reason why, when he became Pope, he issued this, Laudato Si. Interestingly, this was issued in 2017, so I was really gearing up for the fact that the anti-mining elements, including then, at the time, NGO head Gina Lopez, would use this to clobber this on our heads. But guess what? I read this as soon as it was out, page to page, end to end, found out that there are 246 numbered paragraphs. And I counted the references to mining and noted it in the back. See the number 56? That's not the reference to mining. That's the reference to the consumption throwaway economy, which the Pope is saying is destroying the earth. I have ballpen marks here mentioning 3 pages, 3 times where he mentioned mining. One, when he mentioned a situation in one mining area where water was a problem. 2, where he mentioned that there was mercury pollution in a river in an illegal mining operation. And 3, where he mentioned that the indigenous peoples have been treated better. 3 references for mining in Laudato Si. That's why they couldn't use this against the mining industry. Because this Pope is a chemist, understands science, understands the value of everything that God gave for us. But we in the mining industry, we've not done it. In fact, I was snickering because when the operations of the Gatchalians were being attacked in Romblon, I read that one of the NGOs was named Laudato Si. Obviously, they haven't even read the book of the Pope and named their NGO Laudato Si, thinking that this thing is anti-mining. We gotta change the narrative. Another angle of attack is that mining causes global warming. right? But look at this. The top global greenhouse gas producers in the world are China, the United States, India, the EU, and Russia. The Philippines only accounts for 0.4% of global emissions. Let's assume that anything and everything causing GHG in the Philippines is shut down. We will only affect 0.4% of global GHG emissions. The world is still going to go dead because those 5 big blocks of countries are producing GHG. Now, if you look to the right, the big causes of GHG in the Philippines are energy production. Those are our power plants, transport, agriculture. Look at forest and land use, it went down. Industrial processes and waste. Where does mining come in? It comes in under forest and land use. And so I would like to argue, and I've argued with those who claim to be environmentalists, that's why they're against mining, is if you are an environmentalist, go to the Chinese embassy and protest there. Go to the US embassy and chain yourself to the gate, right? Tear up your US visa. Don't go to India, right? Tear up your Schengen visa and, don't go to Russia. But if you are really bleeding for the climate change, that's the reason. And in the Philippines, this is the reason. Shut down all power plants. Walk to school. Eat stone. And you tell me you're anti-mining because you're for the environment? One more thing about the church which bothers me is the principle of subsidiarity. Do you know what this means? It means respecting the opinion of the communities down below, not imposing your will. But I don't know if you have had any experience dealing with anti-mining advocates. Most anti-mining advocates are not from the mining communities. They're from outside. A very good example for me is when that island of Manicani, after it was hit by Yolanda in 2013, we decided, with the permission of the government, to move out stockpile which could flow out into the sea. Now, there were boats painted with the name Caritas Germany on the side, which they were pushing in front of our barges to try to get our barges to ram them. But what was interesting was this. The people pushing the boats were wearing life vests at water level which was up to the waist. If you grew up on an island, most probably the first thing your midwife did to you was throw you into the sea. So there and then I knew that these anti-mining advocates were not from the area and that if the company shuts down the operations, they're not going to lose their jobs. In fact, this is the reason why I didn't get the honor of graduating with Dickey. You see, in the 19 years ago, I was invited by the German government to visit Germany, with 3 other UP students, Marlon Cruz, Jesse Menes, the late Jesse Menes, and a student from La Salle. But we were to go in summer. Now, I had back subjects which I had to finish in summer in order to join Dickey's class, this class of 1980, entering 83. So I had a dilemma. If I went to Germany, I will not be able to finish law, and I had to enter 84. That's why I ended up with Joel Ison. Or professor of medicine of UP. So, go ahead, go to Germany, and just be 1 year late. Now, why do I mention that with regard to subsidiarity? The same thing applies, for example, in our mining in Manicani. I estimate that our SDMP per year would range between 10 to 15 million a year. Let's take the upper limit, 15. For an operation which will range from 10 to 15 years, let's take the lower limit, 10 years. So 15 times 10 is 150 million pesos just on SDMP alone, pouring into that little island of 500 families. Not counting the salaries and the taxes we will pay. I use this story of Germany to say to the anti-mining in Borongan, if you can provide 150 million plus salaries and taxes to the island for the next 10 years, then I myself will argue with my bosses, let's pull back. But if you cannot provide 150 million of SDMP plus salaries and taxes to the islanders for the next 15 years, it is irresponsible for you to stop them from earning something which they will never be able to earn in their lifetime. That's why I remember I was in a forum in Davao with in a Catholic school where I had a hard time getting questions because unlike my friends at the Chamber of Mines, I'm not a nice guy. If you will lie about me, I'll tell the truth about you. In fact, and let me end with this, I remember one time telling a bishop, I can't understand how you of all people can be so anti-mining when mining saved our souls. He said, what are you talking about? I said, Bishop, when Jesus Christ died, our souls were saved. Yes. Was Jesus Christ drowned? Was he burned? No. He was nailed. Without mining, there are no nails. And so without mining, our souls are not saved. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Wow, such an awesome speech, right? And I'm thankful that JB didn't graduate with me because I would be out of a job by now. Right? Such a fantastic speaker. As I told you, he was a debater in law school and college, and he won a lot of awards. So at this point, we will open the floor to questions and answers. But may I ask Luisa Rust and Craig Annison to please join us. Luisa? Yes. And I joined the mining mission led by Ambassador HKU last year to Perth, along with other mining companies and mining lawyers as well. And we were amazed that in Australia, we were told by the mining council there that they approve exploration permits in 2 days' time. And guess, well, we had to share our experience that in the Philippines it takes ages. So, could you share with us what the formula is, perhaps, of the Australian government in keeping a very efficient mining permit registration and system?
Okay. I'm not an expert on the mining industry, but I do know we've been mining for a long time. And we have a lot of projects in the country. And as a result of that, the state government, federal government, the bureaucracy has established frameworks. So I'm sure in the beginning that they weren't processing them in 2 days. So it takes time and capability building and industry experience. And I think the one good thing about the Australian government, even at state level and at federal level, is consultation with industry and listening to industry as well. Also, the mining industry is a huge provider of jobs, of revenue, of taxes. So that means that the government listens to the mining industry. It really drives behaviour. So I think that's worked for that. I think we've been lucky. We've got history, we've got big projects and a lot of money, and that creates change. So it's good.
Thank you. Let's shift to Craig. I was interested in the technology and the services that you offer. But in the Philippines, we have a government agency called the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority, which is NAMRIA. I was wondering if there are areas of cooperation, perhaps, between your company and that particular government agency, or any opportunities for that.
Yeah, thank you. We are talking to various government agencies. So from where we sit, we do work for many governments, not just in this region, but around the world. And I didn't show it today because this is a mining forum, but from a government level, there's a return on investment for that money that's spent to acquire this data. And it's a very attractive return.
Decarbonization would play in the future of mining in the Philippines, for instance?
Oh, in the future mining. Well, since the Philippines is mining critical minerals, which are part and parcel of the new RE sector, so they go hand in hand. That's why for Nickel Asia, we feel like we have two legs in the green economy. Because we do copper. I mean, the country has copper, the country has gold, the country has nickel, and all of these are important in a green future. And so I think it will not be a problem for the mining industry. And there are other problems besetting the mining industry, but a shift into green energy is going to be great. That's not one of the problems.
But in your projects, have you actually used the renewable energy options as well?
We're now looking at that in Rio Tuba. And we're also looking at converting mined out areas into solar farms. Right? Because one of the problems if the RE space is land is expensive. It's difficult converting them sometimes to industrial from agricultural. Sometimes also it's too far from the grid. But if you have a mining concession, perhaps you can change your deal with the government on the land use post mining and make that whole solar farms, and all of a sudden that will solve at least the RE side. The problem is, of course, solar is not base load power.
Thank you. And perhaps we shift again to Luisa. And you've been in the country for like 4 months now?
No, 8 weeks.
8 weeks. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. So perhaps at some point you would be in a position to meet with the mining companies as well, and of course the Philippine government. What areas of cooperation would the Australian government be open to with the Philippine government and the mining companies?
There's a lot happening, Dickie. We got more than half an hour. I could go through it. So the Australian government released its economic strategy for Southeast Asia in September last year. And this strategy really outlines a roadmap for the government to increase its trade and investment ties into Southeast Asia. And of course, the Philippines is one of the key markets that's outlined there. There's also a chapter on mining, on energy and resources. So it's a key priority sector for the region and particularly for the Philippines as well. So there's a lot of area at a government to government level that we have cooperation that is developing, but it's really at an industry level that I see the opportunity for growth. So now that we have mining permits that are here, we have Australian companies that will be that have permits already, now looking to operationalise, looking to raise funds. My job at Austrade is to promote the opportunity for mining here. And unfortunately, with the past history of the mining industry here, there is a perception issue in Australia, around the world, that needs to change. And I'm not saying that it's perfect, and I can tell there's challenges that we all have to manage, but there needs to be a step up from the Australian government side, from the Filipino government side, to work together to promote the industry and to promote sustainable mining, of course. And Australia has fantastic capability in regard to that. So I see it's at a government to government level, but really at an industry level. And why I say that, and I was mentioning it to someone here before, we need to show to Australian industry, to the rest of the world, how success can happen. We have Oceana Gold here, who are fantastic in terms of the work that they've done and worked through a number of challenges through the hard times, but it can be done. And so we need those case studies to be able to make that happen.
Thank you. Shifting back to you, Craig. Well, your products and your services are quite phenomenal, I would think. And one question perhaps that runs through the minds of the audience is how they can purchase the technologies that are used by Xcalibur, and perhaps the costing as well.
Yeah, okay. So all those technologies that we operate, we develop those themselves. So we have a large R&D group, so we're constantly developing technology. It's not off the shelf, so we provide it as part of our service. So firstly, we won't sell it, but we will sell you the solution. Pricing is a very, very good question. obviously the more efficient way to do large surveys. If the government can do large areas and make that available, that's by far the most efficient. I was around when World Geoscience, one of the companies, our predecessor companies, and they used to do surveys back in the 90s through the Philippines. But that all stopped in the 2000s because there was no requests, or there'd be a one request that was very small. You can't do it. The prices are too high to mobilise one. So if there's enough volume or enough demand, prices will be very economical.
Thank you. JV, you mentioned and suggested that the mining companies in the mining industry change the narrative. Some are of the view, however, that there is a danger of green washing. Selling one's company's attainments or achievements in the field of environment, sustainability, and governance. How is this challenge faced by mining companies, and how do you avoid that?
Well, I can only speak for us at Nicolacia. We don't mind facing that type of challenge. Being a listed company, we're transparent with everything that we do. The fact that we submit ourselves to audits by Sustainalytics or S&P and CDP tells you that ours is an open book, and that's the only way to do it. That's why I forgot. I coined a new tagline for NAC. It's "Our future is green at Nicolacia." First, because we're both in renewable and in critical minerals, and second, because of our foray into sustainability, trying to show to everybody it's not going to be easy, but there's no other choice. I think we have no choice. Because, for example, when an Australian government sees what more can I do in the Philippines, oh, but there's a problem. They're not ESG compliant, right? Or we get calls from bankers in Norway. They're happy to talk to us, but they're not happy to talk to anybody else because we submit ourselves to SBTI. So the mining industry in the Philippines needs a lot of help, and they need a lot of capital, and a lot of capital is abroad. Foreign capital is now sensitive to sustainability and ESG. So the mining industry here has to realize that it has to bite the bullet and face the challenges. And I'm sure there's a lot of work for lawyers in that.
Thank you for that. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we would be open to questions from the floor. Kindly identify yourself and ask the question. Thank you. Joey?
Okay. First to Luisa. Many years ago, PMEA actually made a proposal to the DNR, and it's gonna be state funded to fly regional nationwide survey. In the process of streamlining the processing, and we actually proposed that we pilot 2 regions. Fortunately, this was not well received. And would the Aussie government be willing again?
When was that proposal?
2010 or something like that. We actually made a proposal
Yeah.
to the MGB and DNR. I think Tata is also 207.
Yeah.
He mentioned that other like PNG and all had the same.
Yeah. And that was for aerial mapping, was it?
Yeah, for regional geophysics.
Yeah. Definitely we see the value in aerial mapping, and it's really important to have because it creates more certainty for investors to come here and understand, what this country has to offer. As to who funds it, it should be the Filipino government. The Australian government funded all of Australia to be mapped, and how much did it cost, Craig?
50 million? 100 million?
Yeah, 50 or 100 million. It's not for the Australian government to fund it here. We can help in terms of capacity building, helping within bureaucracy to bring the data to life. But really, if the Filipino government want to support the mining industry, start putting money behind it. It's not for Australian government.
Okay, thank you. Greg, I used the word geoscience before in one of our prospects here, no? And it's quite good. But what would be a minimum hectareage or area for a survey that Xcalibur would be willing to do. I'm sure you're not going to do small individual MPSA permits on a survey, no? Because I was really impressed in that slide where you showed PNG. After you did the survey, these were the number of applications. A year after, it's almost the entire area you flew in.
Yeah, well, it's the issue with scale. So if you have a small area, certainly we can come and fly it, but it'll be high cost. We have high fixed cost. If we've got to bring our plane into the country because there's no other work, it's a big high cost. If someone wanted to do a standalone survey, mining companies say, yeah, I really want to do it, probably somewhere between 100 and 500 square kilometres would be the minimum. But it'd still be expensive. If there was 2 individual mining companies we could do back to back, that'd be cheaper. If there was 3, even better. But even better to do the whole lot at once. But that's the cheapest, most efficient way of doing it.
JB, I'm sure changing the narrative. No, I don't. I think you should bring it to the National Unified IEC program, and I think that would be a better way to do it. No, it's funded by the SDMP anyway, so maybe you could comment on that.
The people heading the NU IEC are good Catholics. I'm not. So when my brother became a priest, I argue that when your brother becomes a priest, you're saved. No matter what you do, no matter what you say. See, so I'm saved, right? But you see, as I said, the traditional, leaders are good Catholics. They would not dare be as argumentative as I. But we should do that, right? Like for example, in Giwan, because the bishop wanted to do a march from Borongan to Giwan from all other towns, anti-mining. I said, put up billboards showing the Pope and what he said in Waray, so that they can be welcomed by the words of wisdom from His Holiness Pope Francis. That's why I don't get invited to those meetings.
Okay, thank you. Just for everybody's information, JB was one of the first guys in Giwan after the typhoon, bringing all the relief goods. So when he stepped out to the plane, that's how we saw that it was an atomic bomb area.
Thank you, Joey. JB and I share a common fact. I'm also a brother to 2 priests, actually. So whenever they pray for my health, all I can do is to drink to their health, But any other questions, please? JB, perhaps on the issue of ESG, right? This environment, sustainability, and governance. Has Nickel Asia gone to that aspect of governance, and what activities do you have in relation to that?
Yeah, in governance, for example, we this range from issuing a anti-bribery policy through the company. When we did that, there were snickers, but we had to do it. And good thing we did it because 2 years later, here comes Shell looking for a partner. And when they saw that we had something like that, right? It was a UN Global Compact principle, the last one, number 10. It was a box to tick for us. It includes, for example, putting more independent directors on the board. So we're all doing that I think the governance, frankly, is one of the easier ones to do. For a mining firm, it's really the environmental ones which are difficult, specifically because your activity creates GHG emissions. The only way you can be zero is if you stop operations, right? But for governance, I think it's much easier. And I know that our corporate counsel, Attorney Gina, is part of your network of lawyers in the industry, and that's why we're proud of what we've been able to accomplish in that area.
On the area of diversity and inclusion and labor force empowerment, what does Nickel Asia do in respect of that?
Well, in the area of diversity, let me shock this room. 2 years ago, I came out in a column on my mother's birthday. So I'm the highest ranking LGBT member of the board of Nickel Asia. Diversity is, so I in fact told the board, look, we need to have 50% male and we're not 50%, so the men have a choice. Go to Thailand.
Tom is from Bangkok.
Or we expand the board and add more women. We are proud of the fact that Nickel Asia was the first company in the Philippines which appointed a female as a resident mine manager of Rio Tuba, of the largest mining operation in the country. So all of that is now we have Pride Month every, I don't know when is Pride Month, every June, right? I don't get part of that, but see, so all of that is part. No? But in labor, again, I think Attorney Dicky, you know very well that many of the mining companies have excellent labor relations with their unions. Very few really have issues. Again, that's a testament to the strictness of the Mining Act, for example, and the responsibility of the owners of the mining firms.
Thank you. On the issue of, yep, please. Any question? None? Sorry.
I've got one.
Please,
Yeah,
Luisa.
I've got one. I've got one for you. I'm interested. I'm very new, so I might be stumbling into a territory I know nothing about. In Australia, we have a Indigenous population, and particularly in Northern Australia and different areas. But we have a framework in place. It's not perfect, and we have land councils. There's negotiation. I'm interested in your views around Indigenous engagement here in the Philippines and how that is working or not working, or just your views. I'm interested.
Of course, the indigenous peoples are an important part of the permits we get for mining. They get a considerable chunk of the royalties where there is a indigenous peoples in existence before mining. I think the problem which we are encountering with that, from my perspective, is sometimes there's a battle for recognition in one area. Even if one IP group has had recognition for so long, because so much money is involved, right? And then you have fly-by-night IP organizations cropping up, claiming to be IPs, etc., etc. Another area which I think is a problem, but which is beyond the control of the mining industry, is how is the money spent? I mean, it is argued that so much money is being given to the IPs, but their lives don't improve. Now, the problem there is when you give them the money, you don't meddle in how they spend it. But if an IP group is too paternalistic, with the leader deciding what to do with everything, then there's nothing you can do. So there are areas of improvement for that. But I think it was a good move to recognize the indigenous peoples, because this was an indigenous peoples country before the Spaniards came. Except that, like everything else in the Philippines, it's easily politicized. And that's where, the mess starts to.
Yep, thank you. And thank you, Luisa, for that question. I'm sure some of the companies here would have had their own experiences. Would you like to share one? No? It's confidence. Yeah. Please, Joey.
Yeah, it's 1% of your cost.
Not the parade. Yeah.
But the problem is that compared to Australia, the IPs are recognized in the region. In Australia, you can get a 1/64% bloodline, and you could be anywhere on any side of the country. But here it's well recognized. The only problem here is that even though it's recognized, and if the IPs don't give their consent, your permit will not be issued. So you don't get a consent. In Australia, you get a cooling period, and the government can step in to help the company and the IP group come to an agreement. But there's a cooling period, and nobody can step in. In here, if your application is cancelled, that's it. Anybody can come in. And, anybody can also put in money to pay the IPs and give their consent to somebody else rather than the first applicant. So that's a concern here.
Thank you, Joey. Questions, please? Yes.
George Beadle's my name. JB, my question relates to changing the narrative. the mining industry, as the metal mining industry, has got a bad name. And I think we all recognise that. But why is it that the coal industry, the limestone industry, infrastructure, and all those sort of cement industries don't get mentioned? They're basically left out of the narrative. And why is it that? And why is it just the mining sector, as whether they're nickel miners, copper miners, and whatnot, gold miners, they're the ones always targeted, and particularly targeted by the church? Why do you think that is the case?
I think part of the problem also has to do with the Mining Act, because the Mining Act separated quarry for mining, if I'm not mistaken. And therefore, the quarry people, say, we're not mining. Now, you're right. It also surprises me, not that we want to spread the hate to the coal industry, but trust me, Semirara is getting a lot of flack for their operations as well. But it's very laser focused, the anti-mining arguments. It all is focused on the large scale miners. Any disaster which is more often than not caused by small scale mining is attributed to large scale mining. In fact, I had a discussion once with somebody who said, you see, the proof that mining is not responsible is what happened to Felix when they had this tailings dam collapse. I said, no. The fact that Felix paid 1 billion pesos is proof that they were responsible. The fact that there was an accident is not proof of responsibility or irresponsibility. Accidents happen when human beings are involved, plus of course then God, right? Because it rained and rained and rained, which reminds me, I used to argue that if the reason is an act of God, we should ask the church to pay. But the fact that Felix made good the damages that were caused to the river, paid up 1 billion, is proof of responsibility. Responsibility is not that nothing happens, it's that you answer for the consequences of your actions. But you're right. And the problem is, so going back, it has been decades that the mining industry has been quiet, not telling the world what they do. Because there's no reason to spend 500 million pesos like Coke does to propagandize the schools it built, because it sells that to you. But then the consequence is now what we're seeing. A mindset built over time that mining is bad, that the big miners make so much money, that the communities are poor. When if you take a survey, the communities would be 60, 70, 80, 90% for mining. It's the communities outside of mining which are against it. Then of course when the church comes in, that's different because there's fear of God, which doesn't apply to me. But then, as I said, in a country like the Philippines, right? So very difficult. But we got to start.
Thank you. So you mentioned the church again, and others in the industry perhaps look at church issues as localized, in the sense that they would deal with the diocese itself, and so encouraging a change of narrative whereby the industry faces it as a whole perhaps is a challenge in itself.
Well, but the CBCP came out with a statement, and the CBCP, that's a national statement. I remember we brought Bishop Palma, who was Bishop of Cebu, president of the CBCP, to Rio Tuba. He planted a tree. He said, so responsible mining is possible. But then he told us that they could not impose their views on the different bishops. So while he was convinced, he could not convince the Bishop of Borongan or the Bishop of this or the Bishop of that. And now you have the CBCP with a national letter saying they're opposed to mining.
Thank you. Perhaps as the last question, JB, how do you define the balance between financial performance of a mining company and the initiatives that they have for ESG?
That's a very, it's good you asked me that, because it's budget time in Nickel Asia.
Yeah.
And whenever something will be discussed between our operations and finance, then I'd make a face and they'd say, oh, that won't pass with our sustainability guys. It's difficult, as I said. It's expensive. For example, we are replacing our ICE trucks with hybrid trucks. I won't mention the brand, Komatsu. They're expensive. They're expensive, but over time, we believe it will pay off. In one of our mine sites, we have a 4.3 kilometer conveyor belt. Saves us gasoline from trucks. Expensive. But in the future, we can make that a Disneyland sort of ride where you can. Anyway, as I was saying, because our sustainable journey was driven by our president and CEO himself, who is not like me, an employee, but is the owner. For Nicolasia, it's much easier.
Incidentally, I'll tell Dennis to give you more stock options.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I think, unless there's another
One more?
question. Yes, please.
Sir, yeah. This is for Sir JB, and probably Sir Craig can contribute. Yeah, my name is Jay. I'm from JHT. So in terms of emerging markets right now, we have AI technology. Do you integrate this technology now in your ongoing projects, or probably particularly the 3 mines that you have mentioned? And if so, does it have a lesser impact in terms of social and environment? That's all. About AI technology in your.
Yeah, we're working on AI. I think you mentioned different markets there. So tell me if I'm wrong, but if we acquire the data for mining, that data has multiple uses, and one of that's groundwater, and one of that's environment. So that data set is an investment, not just for the miners, but for all of it. And if I got that thrust wrong, yes, we are doing AI. And the reason why we're doing it is that we acquire very large data sets over whole of countries. And the traditional way of looking at and extracting the data out of that is very people intensive. The world's moving quicker. We need to be able to do that quicker. So we're working on AI to extract as much as we can out of that data really quickly. So yes, we are using it. Yep.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you. And perhaps, yes, Luisa.
Did you want JP to?
JV, did you want to?
No, I just want to.
Okay. Perhaps we can segue now into the final words of our speaker, and we'll start with Craig.
No, just say thank you for the opportunity to speak. We've just started our push into Philippines. I've been here 4 times. David's his first trip. I'm pretty sure we'll be doing surveys, or our contemporaries. We may not win it, of course. But I think we'll get there. There's promising signs. I think there's a groundswell. I think the timing's right. And, can't wait to do it.
Thank you. Luisa?
Yeah. Final words. I want to be really profound. But, I want to bring more companies like Craig's business here and really grow the Philippine mining industry in a sustainable way and work with people like JP. I'm inspired by your stories, amazing. And, but you're a great example of a partner that Australian company would want to work with. And so I want to promote you. And I look forward to doing that over the next 3 years.
Thank you. And our main speaker, JV Baylon.
Apologies if I offended anyone, but that's what I normally do. Being a middle child and a student of Dickey's University, we do nothing but offend the powers that be. My only point, again, is this. The mining industry has labored for so long under, a terrible, terrible image. But part of it is its own cause. I mean, we cause it ourselves. It's about time because we have enough proof points. It's about time to, talk about, you want to talk about environment and science? Let's talk about data. And it's about time that every Filipino has to realize that you cannot have a green future without the mining industry in the Philippines and anywhere else in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, we end our session.